Hey, 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 it's day 68 of a screenwriter's journey. I don't know if you'll be able to hear in the background. I've got the sound machine on because I'm actually recording this relatively early in the morning when certain people are still asleep in the house, but not me. I am busy at work. So, what's happening on day 68? We're in the Motel 6 room, and it's a little more than halfway through the script. We're tweaking some dialogue because of what's happened previously that I've made changes on. And so the deal was they're in this motel room. Holly doesn't know that she is going to have to stay there, but that is what she is now learning from the conversation that's going on between Gary and Hogan and Abby. And so, yeah, the reason I'm hesitating is, again, like a few other things, this may or may not change in the future. But if you don't think it should, you can comment and you can like and subscribe and share. You can also watch The Key on Amazon Prime. I seem to get that in inadvertently every two or three episodes. Um, let's see here. Now, okay, so yeah, Holly takes him outside and basically lets him know that whatever he thinks, she's not going to leave until she has made sure that Alexa, I'm talking about the Amazon Prime artificial intelligence, Lexi is safe. Um, so what's going on here? Hogan is basically telling her that they're going to have a bunch of agents on the ground in the morning, and that certainly Holly cannot do anything that all of these people can't collectively do. And Holly's introducing the fact that two of them were killed down at the cabins. And it looks like I'm about to delete a chunk of dialogue. All right, hold on. Let's see, what am I going to do here? Yes, sometimes you you go into a scene and you start changing things, and the basic, not you're just not just changing dialogue to fit the current plot, but you're changing dialogue to fit what has to be a new, not a new plot, but a new direction the story's going during. Oh my gosh. You're changing it based on things that have to change because the story's going a different direction, and then you realize, oh, I've got all this old dialogue, and then you start reading through it and you go, some of that's pretty good, but good dialogue isn't good if it's if it doesn't fit into what's currently going on. um, so they leave that scene kind of nebulous. Let me touch base with my boss and get back to you. And then Holly says, I've got a better idea. And then what we don't see happen is probably, well, not probably, but Holly calls Paul and Paul calls Noble and talks to him. So let's see. Melissa does the same. So, yeah, so the page, so it's the top of page 60. Let's get everyone on the same page, which unfortunately, see, I am not above criticizing my own work. So what's happening now is Holly, well, not Holly, but the movie's basically saying, hey, audience, in case you're confused, here's what's happened up till now. When she says, let's get everyone on the same page. And then we go through and say kind of not really backstory, but, and I didn't want to do a flashback, obviously, but kind of what's happened up until now to get us to the point where we are. If you love this next few pages, which I originally remember commentating on, was pretty clever in my own humble opinion. And that was probably several weeks ago when I made those comments. And now, at some point, I think I'm probably going to realize that maybe this isn't the best bit. Because you think of it's halfway through the script, it's a little bit more. And after the midpoint, as we all know from Save the Cat and other books, and some people poo poo structure and that it has to be boom boom boom, and certainly I don't I don't make it my goal to put the inciting incident or the catalyst exactly on a certain page and the turn on exactly and this and exactly, but it is amazing. You can look at almost all movies and you can interpret what happens in these ways. So, what's my point? My point is that after the midpoint of the false victory or defeat, what happens is the bad guys close in and the pace picks up even more, the ticking clock, etc., etc. But what I've got going on here, and this is a little past halfway, is that I'm kind of recapping the story and not really recapping it, but I'm filling in some blanks. Um, and I don't know at what point I'm going to realize that, hey, it's just a bunch of talking. No matter, again, and I'm not saying the dialogue is sparklingly clever or anything, but no matter, how good the dialogue is, no matter what's happening, et cetera, if it doesn't serve to push the story forward, you got to get rid of it. So I think what I might end up doing, and this is just conjecture or subjecture. No, I don't know what that word is, but I may have to figure out a way to not have all of this stuff. Because, again, I've said many times the goal in this was trying to make as relatively simple a plot as possible. And so at this point, I still have Rachel working both sides of the fence with the FBI and with Salerno and kind of playing them off each other and, doing some mythical bidding up of what they're going to pay her for doing what. As Paul says, let the bidding begin, and then Rachel says it ends at 4 million. And the reason she did this, obviously, other than to line her own pocket, was that she thought that Lexi would say, "Wow, Mom, you are going to give me $2 million, so that's really awesome," which on the one hand is, but on the other hand, trying to buy someone's love usually doesn't end up well. So Noble is saying when Salerno's in custody, we're going to give Rachel the money. And so we've basically set up the whole thing of what's really going on. And then we talk about the DNA test at the bottom of 61. However, so this is, it's not, it's not 5 minutes of talking, but it is probably a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And even though it's sort of interesting that it cuts between 3 different locations, so I guess that's kind of how I justified it is, I'll do this in a very clever way, and then no one will know because it's just not one person talking for one big long dialogue block. But so at this point, and this is 68 days into writing. So looking back, I'm a little surprised that at this point I'm still leaning kind of on this crutch of recapping with a bunch of dialogue. So shame on you, meaning me. All right. All right, what's going on? So I think probably the reason, and I think this isn't too much of a general statement, but whenever you find yourself having to go over and over and over a certain sequence and trying to get the dialogue to work or trying to make the logic work or whatever, it's usually a sign that there's a bigger problem, either in the whole story, in a character, in the conflict between 2 characters. If it's feeling forced, it usually means, unfortunately, you need to step back and say, where did this start going off the rails? Having said that, I don't know that I consider this completely off the rails by any means, but obviously you can see by the way I'm jumping back and forth and trying to figure out, what comes next. And who says what, that there are some challenges that I'm facing. And when you're in the middle of those, it's the old can't see the forest for the trees. You're in the thick of things and you're writing, and it's like, if I try hard enough, I can solve this problem. Instead of saying, why don't I stop writing for a little while, step back, and kind of either give it a couple days or reassess, which you can tell by my commentary here that I eventually get to that point, and I do that. Do the do run. So yeah, at the bottom of 62, Lexi's got that dialogue basically saying, hey, I'm not down for any of this. Let's just make it all go away. And Rachel is, oh, excuse me, it's the morning and I'm yawning. Rachel's basically telling them, so sorry, that's not going to happen. And then they change the topic to, are you hungry? Not really, but I could split a medium pizza or a large, which I still like that dialogue just because it sounds like something a kid his age would say. And then Rachel trying to not really get back in their good graces, but seeing if she's been totally like shut out and shunned, says, hey, I could go for a slice. And Lexi replies as she does. And yeah, I think that end of that scene works pretty well. So back in the Motel 6 room, we're kind of wrapping things up from this multi-page backstory reveal, what's really going on. And when you leave a scene with a question, and then you have another scene in between, or two scenes or whatever, and then you come back to that same scene where the question was asked, and like Holly, in this case, you're still there, Paul. One danger is that the audience will have forgotten what happened as the cliffhanger of that scene, and then the first part of that scene plays out kind of in confusion because what are they? Oh yeah, that's right. There was a scene before when they did blah, blah, blah. So I think you always have to be careful when you do something like that. And so is that to say that I'm going to change that scene? You'll have to stay tuned and see. You're off the hook, Marshall Hart. Your replacement just walked through the door. Say hello. So yeah, that's not really working too great for me. If you think it is, leave a comment. Watch Holly's face, just series of emotions, gives her some space. I'm sorry. Due to my rule of not going back, I don't know what that I'm sorry is in relation to. And so inside the Motel 6 room, I don't know why Holly is going through this. Basically, I think they've told her that since your replacement's here, you can go and be on your way and you don't have to worry about this anymore, which of course is not Holly's mindset, but she doesn't really want to admit it to anyone. So Hogan is offering to get her out of there. Holly reminds him of what's going on. And so I don't want to, no, I won't ruin this. And what I'm referring to is the room's paid for until checkout tomorrow. The idea that they're not going to get the DNA test back until the morning. And so there's this, basically 12 hours of what's going to happen during that 12 hours. They're going to eat dinner, then they're going to all sleep, and then we're going to pick it up the next morning. Certainly that's not unheard of to have, most stories take place over several days or weeks or months or years. So, but in this case, knowing the situation that the kids are in there with Rachel, they're waiting for the tests, and the idea that Holly, especially Holly, is just going to sit around for 12 hours while they wait for the results to get back, as opposed to Abby finding out where the place is and then Holly sneaking in and trying to rescue him, which would probably be more of a typical thing that would happen. And now we're back in the room, and Gary is saying, well, if we do find the place, you're just going to go in there and shoot people up. Holly turns the tables on him, and I think this is the same as the previous drafts for the most part, so I'm not going to completely go over this. But Gary is again railing on Holly, and as I think he did sort of on the plane, right? Okay, so Abby finds it. I'm skipping all over the place here. I am just reading this. Yeah, that whole flirting thing, that was not great. So I'm trying to work out the logic of Holly having told them her plane was delayed 4 hours. She had alluded something similar to Paul, and Noble thinks that she's there for a limited time. And now it's all coming back to tomorrow. Can you really stay that long? Why don't you leave now? Why don't you take up Hogan's offer to take you back to the airport? And so it's sort of becoming a muddled, fuddled, duddled, sound like Dr. Seuss mess. And again, this is when bad guys close in, and all that's happening now is they're just yakety yak yak. And so I mean, some of it, keeping her safe was your job. That's still good. And if you hadn't been so eager to start your new one. And that is a big question of Gary's and maybe the audience's. Why did you come back? What did you come back really to accomplish? And so, yeah, this, I don't know, is one of those things where I was experimenting with how far I want to take that whole idea of Gary not really having a crush on Holly, but sort of, I don't even know it's not like an infatuation. It's just that it is what it is. And I'm referring to when he says you're not nearly as pretty close up. All right, so it was one of those things where, as I've said before, if you're ever in a hole, you can always have the phone ring or a bomb go off, or in this case, Abby says, got it, and then they find where they're being held, or at least where it appears they're being held. But then my whole thing was, what's Holly going to do about it? As Gary said, is she going to call an Uber? Is she going to walk over there? Is she going to call Hogan? Is she going to call Paul? What is the outcome of the work that Abby has done? And really, I realized that there really isn't an outcome. Oh, the day ends. Day 68 is over. I won't ramble too much more except to say thank you as always. A sincere thank you. That didn't sound super sincere when I said it, but it was. Glad you're hanging in there with me, or maybe this is the first day that you've tuned in for some cosmic reason. There will be more. I won't tell you how many more, because that might really depress you like it may depress me. But I will be here again for at least one more day on the Screenwriter's Journey.